What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are testing 5 micro servos under 20 bucks. We have a pair of the little Emax EOS 8 in the digital and analog versions. We have an Ecopower 827. It's a high voltage 8.4 volt capable micro servo. We've got a Furitek Springbok. It's a 9-gram Metal Gear Digital servo. And last but not least, we have the CCXRC Honey Badger, another Metal Gear Digital servo. We'll be testing the stall torque of all of these servos at both 4.8 and 6 volts, except for the Ecopower, which doesn't list a rating at 4.8 volts. It only has 6 and 8.4 volt outputs listed on the package. I also noticed that in comparison to all the other servos that show their stall torque ratings, the Ecopower is rated in dynamic torque, which we won't be testing. That requires different test equipment. We will be testing the stall torque of the Ecopower and showing those results. We'll be taking 3 tests for each servo, and then our final result will be an average of those 3 tests. Our servo testing rig is set up to take measurements in ounce inches, and I did that for a couple of different reasons. The first reason is because pretty much all servos that you buy have ounce inch ratings on the package or are at least available online. The second reason is that the long servo horns out of the Emax servo kits have a measurement from the center hole out to the end of exactly 1 inch. So that was another deciding factor on taking the measurements in ounce inches. It's also really important when taking the measurements that the scale is set up exactly 90 degrees to the servo arm to make sure that the reading is as accurate as possible. The rig has been created to be extremely rigid to make sure that the results are as consistent as possible. I'll also be converting the results to kilogram centimeters for those of you out there who prefer that rating. Please note that being a conversion, it will be subject to rounding errors and it won't be quite as accurate as our measured ounce inches. However, it will be a pretty good approximation for comparison purposes. Alright, let's get to the conclusions, and I just wanted to start by saying that I'm not trying to champion any particular brand here. I'm not trying to make anybody look bad. I've purchased all of these servos with my own money, and I'm just trying to satisfy my own curiosity and hopefully share some useful information with you guys. Let's get started with the popular little Emax Analog servo. I'm sure a lot of you guys out there are familiar with this servo, available at around $9. They're a great bang for the buck, matching their specifications really closely at 6 volts and actually far exceeding the spec at 4.8 volts. So running one of these little guys off a stock 5 volt BEC, this thing's going to be pushing out more torque than what's rated on the package. So that's a great little performer for the money. For me, reliability has been a little bit of a concern. I've had about 8 of these things and 3 of them have just sort of randomly let go. One of them was straight out of the package. It was warrantied by Emax Hobbies. Every time one of them's burnt out, I've pulled the cover off the back, inspected the electronics, and it's always a transistor on the main board that's burnt out there. So I don't know if that's just my experience and I've just had bad luck, or whether that's a common theme for these little Emax servos. But great bang for the buck and really well suited to running off a stock 5 volt BEC. Up next, we've got the Emax Servo's digital counterpart. Now, reviewing the test data at 4.8 volts, you can see the third pull at 4.8 volts was 19 ounce inches, and that is well below the previous 2 tests. Now, I think that has come down to user error. Actuating the servos during testing, I was using a transmitter, and the speed with which you ramp up the servo onto the scales does have an impact on the end measured result. So looking at the previous 2 pulls at 4.8 volts, this digital servo is still pushing out more torque than what's claimed on the package, and tracking very closely again at 6 volts. So there doesn't look like there's any advantage in torque between the digital and analog servo. It looks as though the digital is pretty much putting out exactly the same power as the analog, with the digital servo being a higher resolution. Centering and holding power should be improved. I'm also curious to see if long-term durability is better with the digital servo versus the analog. But around $12, putting out about the same power as its analog cousin. The Ecopower 827 digital Metal Gear servo is actually the servo that inspired this whole test video. I replaced a burnt out Emax Analog servo with this little guy, expecting to experience considerably more speed and torque. However, when driving the vehicle out on our rock course, it just didn't seem to even match up to the power of the cheap little Emax servo. So looking at the specs on the package, the servo is rated in dynamic torque, which is different to the static torque we're testing here, and that's why I wanted to test this against other servos and really see where it stacks up in terms of its stall torque. So at 6 volts, it's putting at 22.43 ounce inches, and that goes up to 28.03 ounce inches at 8.4 volts. So even at that higher 8.4 volts, this servo is really only just as powerful as some of the other either equally priced or more inexpensive servos. So not a great bang for the buck in my opinion. It's also a larger form factor than some of the other servos. As you can see, it's considerably longer, which makes installation in some vehicles more difficult. It also runs really hot, especially at that 8.4 volts. I noticed doing those 8.4 volt pulls, this thing was starting to get a fair bit of heat building up in it. So not something that I'm going to continue to use, but really interesting to compare how it stacks up to other servos. The CCXRC Honey Badger during testing was able to very closely match the specifications on the package. It's really nice to see a product that just does exactly what it says on the package, and what you see is what you get. And I really like that honest representation of the power output of this servo. It's a smooth, quiet little servo, and it didn't get too hot during testing. It appears to be a rebranded AGFRC B9 DLM servo. The specifications and the form factor are identical to that servo. If this little guy proves to be reliable, then I think at $17 it's an excellent bang for the buck and a great servo under 20 bucks. The last servo that we tested was the Furitek Springbok digital Metal Gear servo. Again, it's another one that looks like a rebranded AGFRC B9 DLM servo. It shares identical specifications and form factor to the CCXRC Honey Badger. And during testing, it tracked very closely with its claimed specifications, which just confirms the fact that it is very likely an identical servo to that Honey Badger. At $14, it's a couple bucks cheaper than the Honey Badger, which is a great bang for the buck. Again, if this little guy proves to be reliable, it's going to be an excellent choice under 20 bucks. There you have it, guys. 5 micro servos for mini rock crawlers under 20 bucks. It's been a lot of fun building the servo testing rig and testing all of these servos out. I hope I've been able to provide you guys with some useful information. If you like this style of content, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.